Put record. Okay, it's 2:05. We're now starting and we're recording. This is the final session of 360 Volunteer Engagement Idea Exchange, called The Exchange. Then this is our 5th year. The topic for today is closing out the year with strength in volunteer engagement and aligning activities with state goals and priorities for 2024. Back in August, we asked people who were attending to make suggestions for topics for the remainder of the year. And this is one where we got several suggestions and people wanted to talk about what we've done in 23 and how we can get started on 24. So we're glad to see you here today. And we're going to start our first question with Dr. Mary.
Thank you, Deborah. And as soon as I ask the question, I'll put it in the chat so that people can read it as well. So as Deborah said, we are at the end of the year and we want to know your feedback on some things. And for example, did volunteers accomplish everything they planned to handle this year? That's the first part of the question. As a volunteer, did you accomplish the things you had planned? And those staff members here, did your volunteers accomplish everything that they planned to handle this year? And to follow that up, what tweaks did you have to make to ensure that your volunteers had successful engagement efforts this year? Anybody want to start with those two parts of the question? Linda, I see your hand.
Yeah, I thought I'd just kick things off. Yeah, it's been an interesting year for us. I think, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of us were thinking about going to hybrid events and individual, getting in-person events and trying to find a balance between those. And I think we have finally come across that not all volunteers are wanting to get out there yet. They're getting together in groups and meeting may not be top on their list. And so we were thinking as we were developing goals for next year of trying to make events smaller, but more quality and less. Rather than a big event, we try to have just a smaller event and have many more of those kinds of little events. So I don't know if others have found that too, that there's a reluctance of volunteers to get, or not volunteers, but anybody to get more involved this year and how they've dealt with it. Just to add to your questions, Mary.
No, well, I think that's much a part of the question as well, because I know in my own situation, I didn't realize what I'd feel until I got in an in-person situation. And in some, if there were a lot of space and if there was, kind of distance between participants, I felt a little more comfortable. However, if it was kind of a crowded situation, I found that my anxiety increased and I wasn't focusing on my anxiety. I just felt it and I would put my mask on. So, I know we all have our individual ways of responding, but we have to be patient and give each other grace for that and give our communities grace for that. So no, Linda, I think you're spot on. Anyone else want to add to those questions about events planned and how those things were handled, or did you have to make any tweaks? Like Linda said, having more events, but smaller quality events. Anyone want to respond?
Well, Oh, I
ahead.
was going to say, while we're waiting, Kathy put in the chat, she's actually looking for, and it's something I'm thinking of as well. And when you say you're going, Linda, to smaller events, what do you mean by that? You know,
So smaller meet and greet kind of events. In the past, Greg and I would try to do 2 or 3. I'm the volunteer state president in Vermont, just so you know where I'm coming from. But we would try to put 2 or 3 big events at wineries together. And then we discovered, maybe at a smaller spot and try to hit more areas of the state. And that also extended to some of the housing seminars we had, some of the advocacy seminar meet and greets that we had, coffee times. So just meeting in coffee houses with a small group of people in that community and targeting that with our both our mailings as well as our internet messages, those kinds of things.
right?
Thank you. So the second part of that is, if the accomplishments were on target for 2023, what support would you like to have available for 2024 to make your event successful? Volunteers or staff partners? Mark, are you raising your hand, or are you just trying to let me know that you're in the room?
I'm sorry, I was shifting in my chair.
Well, you always have something great to contribute. Do you have anything you want to say?
So our folks were ready to get out and get in the community. I mean, we were the main sponsor of the John Coltrane International Jazz Festival, and that brings 10,000 people to our city, but it was outdoor and it was hot. We learned that moving digital is great, except for when you're in the South and it's hot, that actually iPads, iPhones, and other electronic devices will overheat very fast and take a long time to cool down. So I made a presentation about this to the large region last week. Have a backup plan for your backup plan for getting engagements. So we learned some lessons from that, and the fact that in the day outside, scanning barcodes or QR codes can be extremely challenging for older adults because they've been warned by their friends and family and spouses, don't do that. It could be a scam. So we have some education to overcome, but also to have options for people to meet them where their comfort zone is on technology.
I think that's an excellent suggestion on both ends, because we do have that really strong messaging about QR codes, and we want to slap them QR codes up and have people take different surveys and check in and everything. So we do have to be kind of mindful of what we're saying and what our expectations are too. So thank you so much, Mark, for contributing that. And the backup on technology, because those things will catch on fire. Anyone else want to answer this question? John, I see you.
I'm John. I'm from Kansas. Just to kind of pile on to what he was saying, I'm a Fraud Watch volunteer, and I was giving a presentation and telling people how don't click links in emails and don't click links in texts and don't go scanning QR codes that you don't know what they're about. And somebody said, but I get so many AARP emails and they all have links in them. And it's hard for me to tell which are the good AARP emails and which are the bad ones. So I don't know if there's something we can do on a national level to give people confidence or put something in the, I don't want to call it spam, but it is spam that we're sending out that tells them how to get to where the link is without them having to click on the link or something, because I'm out there preaching not to click on links, and I'm also preaching to read our emails, and all our emails have links in them. So
yeah. A precarious situation we placed ourselves in, huh? Thank you, John. Well, I'll let you, oh, Martin, I see your hand.
And because I'm a fraud presenter also, and what we do is like John, we tell people do not, do the barcodes, do not do the QR codes, do not click on anything. But I also go in and show them how to distinguish a good email address or a good ULR from a bad one. Now, like John said, yeah, you get a whole bunch of emails from AARP, and most of them are good. But the question is, do we want to click on all of them? And that's the thing. If on a serious side, if AARP could limit the amount of emails they send, because the more if you join AARP, you get a certain amount of emails, and then if you volunteer, you start getting a whole bunch of emails from the different organs or different sections you're volunteering with. So it just goes on and on and on as far as the emails go. But thank you, John, for those comments. I agree with you 100% on the emails. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Bo. Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for going this far. And now we've got another question. Were you able to find ways to use the available talents of all of your volunteers this year? When we're thinking about what happened in 23 and we're looking to plan still for 24, have we found a way to use all of the talents that we think our volunteers have? And this is a question for volunteers as leaders. It's also for staff as we're planning. Have we made sure that we've identified the talents? I know a lot of people put that information on the back of the application. I think it asked for that, but do we use it? Is there some way that you are using that you would like to share with us? Just feel free to come off mute or raise your hand in the reaction panel and let us know. Yes, Miss Priscilla. Where'd you go? Oh, you need to come off mute. You're on mute. Ms. Miller, you're still on mute. Okay. Well, while she's figuring that out, Anita,
Yeah,
would you
I'm
go
also,
on?
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So I'm also calling from Kansas, and I think mine is more a comment than anything.
Mhm.
I belong to several volunteer organizations, and because I'm a minority, I tend to be on a lot of other volunteer panels because they want a minority voice.
Right.
Every nonprofit has such a huge need after COVID, and everybody wants to bump up their volunteer involvement, and it's getting, you really find yourself having to water down to be on top of the many things that involve a minority community.
Mhm.
And yet at the same time, you don't want to be stretched so thin that you end up not being valuable. So I just thought I would make that comment that I don't know if other minority volunteers feel that way, but it's definitely happening in my community. It is very hard to get committed volunteers who are willing to be in it for the long run. They don't mind doing, one thing for 1 hour, but to make a commitment that's longer, I think we need outside persuaders.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting perspective, and as another minority, I appreciate that. But I also wonder, because I'm confident there are people in this meeting who have reached out to volunteers to encourage people on an episodic basis. And they have then moved them into or encouraged them based on their skill set into leadership or longer term commitments. So anyone who has had that experience, either as a volunteer or as a staff person bringing that person on, if you'd like to share that, just come off mute and help the group out here. Share your experience. How did you move from?
Priscilla's off mute.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. All right, Priscilla.
Thank you. So my question is there a database that each of you get with your volunteers and their particular talents that's just available? Not only to you, the leaders, but other people who are maybe on a committee or something. I mean, I had been successful with databases, and then, having that outlined as to each person's talent, that makes a great talking point too, when you're calling them up. So I don't know if that would be helpful or not, and whether there is one or not for each of you.
There is the volunteer portal, so that when people have been enrolled, at least as volunteers, there should be information on them in that portal explaining or listing their interests.
Mhm.
I think every state's probably doing it differently. What's been the experience here? Anyone? Yes, Greg, I think, has his hand first.
Okay.
So I'm the guilty party that recruited Priscilla.
Thank you very much for recruiting
No,
her.
there's a reason, because I came on as the portal champion.
Okay.
And then I learned we had a volunteer support team, orientation, mentoring, and recruiting. And that's the very short-term approach. And I saw, that I needed to be on volunteer support, because that's basically what I'm doing as the portal champion. And then gradually, began to see, as we're still coming out, that we need probably more mentoring in a way that will get people to be open to doing some things, and making them feel like we really want them involved. And it's easy. And I've met people who have fallen between the cracks. And yes, Priscilla, there is a great database. And, if we can get people to answer the calls that we make, and I can't tell you the number of people we have, 60 plus members who do not have a real email address. I called every one of those phone numbers and have had lists like that to try and reach out to people. It is a bit of a challenge, because not only are they afraid of the QR codes, they either don't listen to their message or don't trust me when I say that I'm from AARP, which I can appreciate that particular thought. So we're coming out of that, but at the same time, we are trying to recruit a lot more people and identify people who might be open to new assignments. And that's kind of like, okay, let's see, no harm done by asking. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to do, so that we have a core of people who can do the mentoring, which I think is essential. I mean, it would have saved me 10 months of floundering around until I finally took the portal training. But that's probably where we should be going. We've brought in a good number of people this year, and now we need to make sure we stay with them, saying, hey, have you talked to the state lead? Now we're also, we have 2 staff that have been with Kansas for 2 years or less. We have 2 staff vacancies, And so we have only one long-term staff person here at the present time. So it's just to the work of the two that have retired is really going to hamstring us. And so that's again where we're going to need to mentor a lot more, because staff are going to be trying to pick up the slack for the two staff people that are gone.
Right. Great. Well, thank you very much. And John, you've got your hand up.
I see Martin's hand up also.
Just real quick, Greg, when you were talking about the database, let me just throw something hypothetical out there. So suppose, me and one other volunteer get together some kind of comedy act that we want to do at senior centers, but we don't have anybody to build the set. Is your database, is it a place where we could get in touch with somebody and say, can you tell me if there's any Topeka or Wichita volunteers with carpentry skills? I mean, is it something you can look things up in? Or is it just, if you know a volunteer's name, you can go see what they're interested in? You're still on mute, Greg.
So there is a list of skill sets. I'm not sure if carpentry is on them, but yes, I think if I can't search it online, I can search a download from it for certain keywords.
I think you can run a report that will then give you the list of volunteers. And as you say, search that download will do it. Yeah. So Martin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, from the volunteer side, what I have found out is a lot of times the staff is too bogged down with a whole bunch of other stuff they're doing that a volunteer says, hey, I'd like to do this, and then you never hear from them. So it's sort of like, well, what happened? Because I know I volunteered for one thing, and I followed up 3 months later, never heard back from them. And finally, 6 months, I followed up again, and the person said, gave me some, a little bit of runaround, not really a runaround, but some excuses and everything like that. So I said, and my perception is, okay, fine, you don't need me. Good luck on your own. And it's, and one of and it dealt with fraud, which I've been doing fraud for the last 7 years.
Right.
So it's sort of like, why aren't you following up? Well, why they're not following up is because they don't have enough staff, is what my perception is. And the question is, can a volunteer follow up? Where's the dividing line between a staff and a volunteer? What a staff has to do, and what a volunteer is allowed to do, and how much can they cross over?
Right.
That would be, a question there. But like I said, that's just from the volunteers' perspective, and that's only one person, me, saying sometimes the staff is too overburdened with a lot of stuff that the things just fall through the crack. And you follow up with the staff, and most of the times when I followed up, the staff has all been good. But every now and then, they're overwhelmed with things.
Right. Well, I know that there is a session, a training that we can do. I'm saying volunteer facilitation and training team, and it's called Yours, Mine, and Ours. And what it does is walk people through the limits of what volunteers can do, which are really quite broad. And only a few things have to be picked up by staff. So, again, it depends on the state, but it's something that we can always look at talking about more. I think the vaults, if you have a vault in your organization, they have been provided training on that as well. So, Anita, I believe you've got a comment.
Yeah, I was listening to what Martin said. Again, speaking, I think I'm talking about mainly Asian volunteers and maybe some Hispanics who are maybe new to the country. So, a younger generation or an immigrant generation. I think they need a lot of hand-holding. They have, a bazillion questions that maybe not a natural born American might have. They may be new to the idea of volunteering. And we being volunteers may not have the time to do that much hand holding. So I think we end up speaking to the minority volunteers who, already have, for lack of better words, a clue about volunteering, but then they too are already on so many committees because they are volunteering already for minority-led communities, and they see that's, very, very relevant and important. So I may not be talking about all volunteers when I say that they're going to need way more support than I think another volunteer can give them,
Well,
who's
you
overwhelmed.
right, and you've raised an issue I think that OVE has already identified in some ways. We've started with the cafecitos, which are designed on a monthly basis to bring those who are Spanish speaking together, who have a need to understand what volunteering is about at AARP, and just to build a community there. I don't know that we have the Asian counterpart as yet for Pacific Islanders, Asians yet, but I don't know that that isn't something that could come. So I think they're trying to figure out how the cafecitos are going to work out. If those are working out for people, I can't imagine that it won't be an expanded concept. But thank you, Anita, for that. And by the way, the cafecitos do meet monthly, usually on the third Tuesday of each month. The next meeting will be January. So if you've got someone who might be interested, make sure you check out your OVE update, because a lot of those meetings and kinds of things that are available to volunteers and are useful for explaining what is encouraging for volunteers are in those OVE updates. So anyone else have a comment on the question we've raised? Using talents of all the volunteers?
Deborah, I'd like to just chime in on one of my favorite activities in the role
Sure.
of volunteer
Yes, ma'am.
facilitation training team member. And I've done it for a couple of the organizations, staff and volunteer organizations represented. I always like to know what are you good at and what do you enjoy? I ask those questions and provide an opportunity for both staff and volunteers to respond and put it in a format that can be used after we have the conversation. And typically I use the Jamboard format, or that whiteboard or Post-it notes, so that everybody can put what they're good at and what they enjoy. And why I do that is because, number one, everybody's identifying the things that they specifically want to do, as opposed to someone thinking that because I had a career as an accountant, I might want to do all things related to spreadsheets and numbers, but that might not be true from my perspective. So asking everybody what they're good at and what they enjoy, and then sharing that information with everyone so that you do have that list of things that your volunteer colleagues or the staff partners have, so that if there's an event that comes through that requires a certain skill set, they can look at this list that has been provided and they can reach out to those individual volunteers, as opposed to sending out a blanket email to everyone, because we know we all get a lot of emails. So that's one activity that you all might just incorporate in a volunteer meeting, and somebody might either just do it on Post-it notes and put it up on the Post-it note wall, and everybody take a picture of it, or you can do it in some kind of electronic format so that everybody can get an electronic version of it. So just a suggestion. And I don't see any more hands
No.
up, so I'll go to the next question, Deborah.
Yes, you're ready.
What methods will you use to ensure alignment of your state goals and priorities with volunteer-led activities going into 2024? And this kind of is a good segue from what we just talked about, is if we know what people like to do and they're good at doing, how does that align with your state priorities? And what are you doing to ensure that volunteers are able to lead those things going into the next year? And I put the question in chat so you can read it if you need to. Anyone wants to respond to that? So again, oh, Linda, I see your hand.
Yeah, so we're going to try something a little different this time. My state director and I are going to be talking to volunteers online actually on Thursday. And we're going to go over priorities, national priorities, as well as state priorities. And one of the things he's going to do is tackle some of those priorities. And then I'm going to give examples of what some volunteer opportunities might be within that particular area of interest. So if it happens to be fraud, if it happens to be tax aid, if it happens to be our advocacy program, things along those lines. And I'm hoping that's going to be a really good experiment. And then we'll be constantly giving the link that people can email, our staff directly through, AARP Vermont as a way of getting together. And so I'm hoping that's going to be a good result from that kind of an experiment. And the other thing that Erin, and I see she's online from our state office, she's an amazing person. And what she's been doing is monthly, she's been putting out where we have volunteer needs. And they're not big asks, they're small asks, and just to get back in touch. So I know that there is a lot of need out there, and the more specific you can be, I think that makes a big difference. And also people might look at that and say, oh, wow, I've been doing this for so long, maybe I'd like to switch. So you never know. And hopefully, we'll have good results so that I can share that at a future meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. So yes, that does sound like a really great feedback loop that you have in Vermont. And again, I want to encourage you all to respond to the question and include, what does your feedback loop look like, or does it look like spaghetti? And Glenda, I see you have your hand up. You want to come off mute?
Yes, but I'm on my phone, so I'm unable to come on camera. But thank you. I'm Glenda Du Bois. I'm State Director for AARP Kansas. And I just want to say, number one, we have phenomenal volunteers in Kansas, and thanks so much for their participation. And part of what we're doing today is really a part of our approach as it goes to our state planning and what we've done in the past. We have typically included our volunteers in our state planning, and so that they know. And so we've done that this year. We will continue to do that and involve them in the state plan, and then also do our planning for 2024 in a way that we align it with our state plan. So those activities that Linda's talking about, how do they really relate to our state plan? So with the help of of Greg and others, we'll get that done. And although we are Laura staff now, we certainly have the capacity to support our volunteers, and we appreciate all that they do. They are mighty in Kansas. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Glenda. And I just want to acknowledge that I do see that Kansas is very well represented today from those who have identified themselves. So I want to just give a big old shout out and applause to Kansas for showing up and really representing your state volunteer team. Yes, Kansas is truly in the house. So those of you who have not yet identified your state, again, if you want to just put it in the chat, or if you want to put it behind your name, we really do like to know who's in the room. And thank you, Kansas, for really representing today. Anyone
Thank
else?
you.
You're welcome. The second part of my question is, how do you manage or plan to manage to communicate differences and or barriers or impediments to any actions that going forward in your 2024 state planning? So I know that was a big old mouthful of question, but anyone want to share? Again, the first part is, what methods will you use to ensure the alignment of state goals and priorities with volunteer-led events and activities? And do you have a feedback loop?
Mary, can you or Deborah say a little bit more about what you mean by what does your feedback loop look like, spaghetti or? Mine might be ravioli, right?
Sure. Deborah, you want to chime in on
Yes.
that?
And I mean, when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about, we've got the goals and we've got the objectives, but do we have the volunteers thinking about it in those terms? Then when you start planning, are you looking at, we're just going to go everywhere, scattershot approach to the planning, where the volunteers, and I know, Linda, you've just spoken eloquently about ways that you could do it, which is you look at the plans, then you go to the volunteer decisions and include them in that process. But sometimes you've got the volunteers going, creating things in one direction, the state plan is going kind of differently, and maybe you get it from the staff if that staff person is consistent, and is there long term. So from a spaghetti perspective, when you're planning, sometimes planning like that looks like a plate of spaghetti. It's just kind of going everywhere. And the alternative is to have a little more organization to it, which is what it sounds like, Linda, you all are going to do wonderfully. So thank you for being that great example of the other side of it. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Kathy?
Thank you. It does. And I was going to ask Linda, is this the first year you've done that? What you described with having that kind of a meeting and going over the priorities and then volunteer roles? Because I think some states do that. And then I've heard of a number of states that don't. Volunteers are saying, well, we really don't know what the priorities are. We just do our thing, right? So just curious if that's new for you in Vermont.
No, it's not actually, Kathy. To answer your question, I hope it's okay if I'm just jumping in here. We have done it in the past with our advisory council, or and volunteer leaders, but not just the general volunteer base. So it is new as far as that kind of thing goes. And I've been talking with Greg about the possibility of coming up with something that members might be involved in, but that's going to be a whole different sort of presentation that, will be developed. But leaders, yes, but not necessarily general volunteers. And this is really the first, in conversations past, we've always talked about the heavy hitting kind of programs like fraud and tax aid and driver safety. But I want to get down into the nitty gritty a little bit more. And I know that's something that AARP is starting to think about a little bit more too, of where people are coming, what skills they have and what they can offer. So I know that's in the plan also along those lines. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for such wonderful and engaging conversation. Anyone else before we hand it over to Deborah? Deborah, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, after we had these conversations about links and QR codes, I thought I should put a couple of them in the chat, because what we're asking you to do is to actually help us figure out what the topics are going to be for 24. So there is a link in chat. And then there is also a QR code that you can use. And we will send that out, the QR code and the link. It'll be included in the OVE update this week, and we'll send it in our notice. So it's not spam, but we are asking for your help in trying to figure out what's important to you. You know, what kind of information makes sense? How do we expand our role of documenting things? We have a chatter group on the portal, and that chatter group has a list of materials. There's hundreds of pieces of material that people have used, submitted over these 5 years. But we want to make sure that you know it's there, that we're adding to it. And as our experiences as volunteers and staff continue to grow in volunteer engagement, we're understanding that all of those materials are available, and we're growing that. So I also, of course, I couldn't resist this. I actually have a portal poll. Okay, do you see this poll here? And it asks you just to indicate your interest, if any, in the following topics that have already been suggested for 2024. And it's multiple choice. You can pick as many as you want. All right. And I thought it was interesting. One of the topics that had been suggested is QR codes and events with sweepstakes and how to use them. And lo and behold, here's part of our discussion today. Then recruiting and retaining. Okay. Looks like we're still getting a few answers here. All right. Everyone had a chance to review this now? Looks like a number of these are still. I thought dealing with volunteer conflicts was an interesting one as well. Though, of course, we don't have any conflicts because everyone's so busy. We're just all trying to get the work done. Okay. Thank you all. We do use every piece of information you provide to us, every comment. We look for that. We take those notes and we try to build something that makes sense and that is helpful. So thank you all very much. I'm going to end this poll now. And you can see the results here. Aligning activities is high. Recruiting and retaining and encouraging volunteers to lead is a big one. Looks like probably the biggest one here. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to stop sharing. Any comments or anything at this point for our last minute? We will have a meeting in January. Our meetings will continue on the second Tuesday of each month. So it's going to be pretty early in January. We'll have to get the list out of topics because we always send those out right at the end of December. But our meeting is scheduled for January 9th. That would be the second Tuesday. So I hope that each of you have a wonderful holiday. However you choose to recognize those holidays. Thank you, Dr. Mary, for being a great co-host. Thank you to each of you who spoke up and helped us get through today. I think I've seen lots of people taking notes, and I'm sure they've gotten some thoughts and ideas, feel free, the next meeting, come on, and we're always looking for your comments. So thank you very much. If you've got any documents to share or anything you want out there on the chatter group, send them to me, dturner@aarp.org. Post them immediately. And we're actually recording today, so we'll be able to post this. Thanks to Kathy for reminding me not to keep the recording off. Okay.
And I just want to, Deborah, thank again Kansas for showing up.
Yes.
Glenda, Greg, Cheryl, Anita, John, Priscilla, Ashok, and there may be more Kansas City representatives, but you didn't put your name. So I challenge other states to show up just like Kansas did today, because that made me feel really good that we were in the house with lots of people from Kansas. So how about your state do that next time? And I do see some of my Michigan, my fellow Michiganians in the house too. So I
Okay.
think about that.
Well, thank you. You're always welcome to attend, and the more the better. We get more ideas, the more we see you. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you, Deborah and Mary. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Deborah, you want to stop the recording?
Yes, ma'am.